Good morning, everyone, and welcome to WEBTips. Everyone is currently on mute. If you have any questions, please go ahead and either raise your hand or type them in the question window, and I will let Gary Clough get started.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tara. So hopefully everybody can hear me, and thanks for taking the time out to join. Today we're just going to go over how to style your composer forms and change the look and feel. It's mainly done through CSS, and we'll discuss what that is and how it's used within Composer. I guess I'm supposed to say a little bit about myself. So I've been a software engineer and solution architect for quite some time, probably over 15 years, several different companies working with forms and workflow. I was a WINSHUTTLE employee for 4 years and hired her to develop the Composer product. Was my main focus. And now I'm with CPS since the beginning of the year and taking advantage of Composer and implementing these process improvements for customers. So enough about me. Let's move on. And so what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about what CSS is, how CSS is defined, and then how CSS is used within Composer, and how you can change the look and feel of your Composer forms. What we're not going to do today is kind of give you a tutorial on CSS. There's a ton of information out there on the web on what it can do. It's extremely powerful. And I'm going to go through just the basics in terms of showing you some different style sheets, but the main focus here is to introduce you to what you can do with CSS with respect to Composer, and where that can be defined, how it's used, and the different types of interfaces you can configure with CSS. So what is CSS? It stands for Cascading Style Sheets. The word cascading is there because you can have multiple files that have these definitions of styles that can be cascaded. In other words, it can have different styles for the same elements in different files, and it'll put them all together as one big style. And as I said before, it's extremely powerful in transforming your HTML. You can change, obviously, the look and feel, the color, the size, the text. You can transform stuff. You can just a wide variety of things you can do. And now with the later versions of CSS, you can do even more. And Composer does support CSS 3 and HTML5. So that gives you even more opportunities or more flexibility with what you can and can't do with CSS. So what CSS does is it describes how the form elements are to be displayed within your form. So I'll get into a little bit more detail of the definition of a CSS, but the idea is that you can change the different elements to different styles based on the definition of your CSS. And the nice thing, or one of the benefits of CSS, is it can provide consistency across all your solutions. So if you have a CSS file that you maybe have your company branding colors and those types of things, you can create an external file and reference that within each of your forms so that you have consistency of the look and feel within each of the different forms. Get down a little bit into the nitty-gritty of a CSS style sheet. Style sheets consist of rules. There's a whole bunch of different rules. There's a set of rules that can be defined within a style sheet. And then each rule consists of a selector and a declaration block. And what that means is the selectors are what define which elements within your HTML or within your form that you want to apply the styles to. The way selectors work, each HTML element or form element has an ID, and then you can have class names assigned to each of these elements, or the specific tag name, whether it's an input field or whether it's a label, those types of things. Those are all ways of getting a hold of your element that you want to apply the styles to. And then the declaration block part of the style sheet defines how you want it to look and what kind of transformation or what kind of styles you want to apply to those fields that were found via the selectors. And then you can have obviously multiple styles within the same declaration block. So you can set the font, the color, the size, all that stuff within one single declaration block. So it's just one style sheet for, or one declaration for that one element. Here's just a quick little example of what I was kind of tried to explain there. So if you have an HTML element or HTML file that's defined above, it just has a couple of paragraph tags. Each tag has a class on it. The classes are serif and sans serif. And then what you would define in your CSS is there's a dot notation. So dot serif says, okay, find all of the elements in your HTML that have a class name of serif, and then apply that those with the declaration block is below it, and apply all those styles within that declaration block to those elements that the selector matched. So in this case, it's going to change the serif to Times New Roman. It's going to change the sans serif to Arial, and change the color red and the color blue respectively. So the results below is what you would see after applying the style sheets, the style sheet to that HTML document. The other thing that's very nice about style sheets is it's all dynamic. So as soon as, if you have a ways of adding or removing classes to your HTML and elements, these CSS styles will reflect immediately, and I'll show you how that works once we get into a little bit of a demo. So I hope that kind of makes sense, and this is very, very simple stuff at this point. So within Composer, how do you define or configure all this stuff? There's several ways that you can change the styles within Composer. The first is the most basic way, is the formatting section and the ribbon within the Composer application. At the top there's a ribbon, and you can select an element, with your mouse, and change the color, the size, just a very basic set of styles that you can change without even thinking or worrying about CSS. It does all that in the background, but it's very limited. So if you do need to do additional styling or transformations, then you would need to start thinking about adding some custom CSS. And within Composer, on the Solutions tab, there is a CSS node within the solution tree that opens up a CSS editor, and you can type in any kind of style sheets that you want within the CSS editor. And when you run or load your form at runtime, it's going to download this CSS file and use those styles on your form as you have defined them. Another option is to create an external file with a .css extension, and you can reference that file. So if you put that file on your server, you can reference it, and then any definitions that you have within that file are going to get downloaded onto your form too, and then you have access to all of those CSS definitions as well. Again, this is a real handy or nice way of bringing consistency across your form. So if you have this file that you put on your server, you just put a URL reference to it within Composer, and you have access to all of those CSS definitions, instead of having to reapply all of those definitions individually for each one of your form or each one of your solutions through the CSS editor. And then last is you can actually write custom rules. Behind the scenes, Composer uses JavaScript or jQuery, and there are ways of executing CSS style sheets to specific elements using JavaScript and jQuery, and you can apply those within custom rules within Composer as well. Composer also provides several ways to select elements that you want to apply your styles to. There's a handful of built-in class names that every element that you add to your Composer form will already automatically have these class names assigned to them, so that you can build these CSS style sheets using these built-in class names as selectors to apply your styles. And then each element within your form also has a property called class names. So you can actually type in your own user-defined class name and apply it to any one of your elements, and then use that class name as your selector in your CSS definition. So you can specifically assign styles to individual elements based on these class names that you add to your properties. I'll show you how that works too. And like I said, I'll do a a demo at the end that kind of covers each one of these, so hopefully it'll be a little bit more understanding. And then there's solution specific, which isn't really recommended, where you can actually load your form, interrogate the HTML, and find IDs and tags and things like that. But those IDs are specific to the individual solution that you're working with. And so unless it really has to come down to it, solution specific CSS definitions are not recommended. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the built-in class selectors. So this is a list of them. This is actually, I believe it's on the WINSHUTTLE help page. But these are all the different classes that are automatically assigned to the HTML elements and the form elements within Composer. So if you want to change the background color of all your drop-downs to blue, you can use the .form-drop-down selector. In your declaration block, you put color blue, and then voila, all of your drop-down boxes are now going to be blue background. And it goes the same for all of these. So the majority of the ones on top are pretty much your basic elements that you have available to you within Composer. The bottom ones are more for labels and headers, so you can change all your column headers within your table. You can do text boxes within the table. You can do header label as all of your group labels, those types of things. And the idea here is you can play around with these. You know, if you start setting these selectors and putting some styles to them, you'll see what updates in your form. And again, I'll emphasize that this is more of a tutorial on how to configure and utilize CSS within Composer versus kind of teaching you what CSS is all about and showing you how to use all the different aspects of CSS. The other thing we talked about in terms of selectors was the class names property that you would see on any of your labels or input fields. And if you just type in whatever class name that you would like as the value of your class name's property, you can then use that as a CSS selector, and this specific element that you put this class name on will be affected by the CSS definition. So it's very handy doing it that way. And this way it allows you to specify styles for individual elements versus globally using the built-in class names. And then the other way is external references. Talked about that as well. And this is the solution tree from the solution tab. And if you click on this custom styles, there's an option to allow you to add external references. Typically it's a URL. That URL will just download that definition. In this case that's highlighted here, Google has quite a few different fonts that are available that they provide through CSS. And so what I did here, and again I'll show you this in the demo, is I just made a reference to their tangerine font. And so when I load the form, it's going to download the definition for that font, and then I can go in and I can assign that font to any of my labels. And this is a font that is only available from Google, so it's not built into your browser. It's a custom font. But as long as you have this reference to it, it's going to grab the definition from the Google website and add that definition to your form and give you the ability to use that font. Again, I'll show you that as well. And then in custom rules, we talked a little bit about JavaScript and jQuery. It's pretty much the same format. The $J says is a jQuery call, and then the .form header label, that's just your CSS selector. And then there's a CSS method that you can call, and then just give it the definition, like any other CSS style sheet where the background color is yellow or whatever you want it to be, and it's going to apply that CSS style as a rule whenever you might want it to be applied. So the nice thing about rules is you can put conditions on when and when it doesn't, when that style does not occur. And then last but not least, you can also set style preferences within Composer. So if you want to set your labels to a certain font, your colors, etc., you can do it as a preference. And then when you start creating your form, your elements are going to come in with all of those different styles. Now the key to this though is all these style preferences are stored within the browser. They're not stored on the server. They're not assigned to you as a person. They're all stored on the server. But there is an import-export capability to where you can define your styles. You can export those form styles into a text file, and then you could send that text file to somebody else and they can import it into their browser, and that way you have multiple developers using the same preferences. So with that said, I'll do a little bit demo, kind of show you the different things that went on there and how the different configurations. Let's get back here. So what I did is I created a composer solution and defined each one of these different ways of accessing the CSS. So the first thing I did here was to change, I want to change all the group headers, CSS examples, element styles, to a specific background color and put in a background image. And the way I do that is through the CSS editor. So if I come into the Solutions tab, go into Custom Styles, you'll see this .form header label. So this is the selector that selects every single one of the groups in your form, and it's and the label within each one of those groups. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the background color. This is a brown. You can specify the built-in red, white, blue, green, orange values, or you can specify this is a hex value or the RGB value. And then I found this transparent wood pattern image on the internet, and so I'm going to make that background this transparent image. So what's going to happen is it has a transparent wood pattern, and the background color is going to determine what the wood looks like. One thing I might want to say too is that if you look at the form right now, you're not going to see that. And that's because these are definitions that are defined outside of Composer, or they're going to be applied outside of Composer. The only way you can see what happens when you apply these CSS styles is either using the preview or deploying your solution and running it. So what I'm going to do is the ones that will not show up right away, like the ones if you change your formatting up here, those are going to show up right away because you're in the design environment. There's nothing custom about these CSS these CSS styles. But anytime you use something inside of the CSS editor, then you're going to have to wait till you either preview it or wait till you deploy it. So I'm going to just kind of go through each one of these and show you where they are defined and what the result should be. The next thing I did was I added for the first and third elements, a text box and date picker. I changed the class name to form-block-3D. So if I click on the label here, you'll see I added a class name called form-block-3D. If you look on this one, it also has that form-block-3D. What is that? Well, that's a selector, and it's a class name. So if I go back to my custom CSS, you will see that there is a definition called .form-block-3D. And what it's going to do, this is a shadow CSS style that allows you to make your label look three-dimensional. And again, this is not trying to show you what CSS is all about, but these are a couple of different things that you can do with CSS. And it's mind-boggling actually what you can do with it. So these two elements, when I render the form, are going to look like they're 3D. The backgrounds of the groups are going to look like a wood pattern. And then as you can see, the second and the fourth element, I just used the formatting area up in the ribbon to change these. And those are going to, like I said, show while you're designing the form. And let's just start with those three. So if I wanted to see what those look like, I can either go to the desktop here and look at the preview. And because it's actually rendering the form as if it was rendering the form at runtime, it will download those CSS definitions and bring in the bring in the styles. So you'll see here that I now have a background in my group headers. And this is the background color and that transparent style, so it kind of looks like a wood grain. You'll see these, the first and the third now have these 3D shadow images on it. And then obviously the other two are going to just have the definitions that were defined within the ribbon. Looks like I put it on this one as well. We can double check that. So if I look here, it should have that 3D. It does. It has a 3D as well. So those are kind of the first three ways of doing things. The other one is the referencing this Google Tangerine font. Again, if I go back here, if I click on here, this is where you can add any kind of URL reference to specify any CSS files that may be on your local server, could be on some remote server. It doesn't really matter as long as it's a CSS definition that can be downloaded into the form. And I'll show you how that works. That's going to have to kind of do it at runtime. Dynamic styles with rules. So what I did here is these three elements right here. The first drop down here, I created a range. And this is kind of, you kind of got to know how Composer works to understand this a little bit. But what I did is all of the values for each option in this drop down are actual CSS selectors. And these are all the built-in selectors that I showed before. So when I select any one of these, if I select date picker, the value is going to be .form-date picker, which is the selector for the CSS. The next drop down, I have some styles. If you look at that, these are actually CSS definitions to where the name is the background color, the font family. These are the different CSS style options that you have. So what it's going to do is it's going to, if I select text color, it's going to apply the color CSS definition to whatever element that I've selected. And then last but not least is the settings. So this is just what you actually want to set it to. And when I talk about executing this with rules, I can now click this button called Apply CSS. It has a rule on it, which actually calls a JavaScript function. I could have put all the code in here, but I actually put it here. And what it's going to do is it's going to take the value of the element dropdown, which is your selector. It's going to apply the CSS method to it. It's going to grab the style and the color. And so this is the JavaScript custom code that you can use within rules to apply these styles. I hope that makes sense. It's getting a little bit kind of development oriented, but hopefully you'll see how that works once we get this up and running at runtime. Another option you can do is just build your own elements. So we have a HTML element within Composer, and what I did here is I just added an HTML element and then I put this div tag, and this is just an empty tag, but I put an ID of YY. And so what I want to do is I want to use this ID as my CSS selector. So if I apply any styles to this ID as a CSS selector, it's going to apply it. It's going to apply it to this div tag. And so this kind of shows you a little bit also the power of CSS. So within my CSS, if I look here, I'm going to look for the yin yang selector, and I'm going to apply these CSS styles. There's a before directive and there's an after directive, and what this is going to do is when it finds that div tag with the yin yang class in it, it's going to actually generate the graphics for a yin yang symbol. And again, I'll show you how that works. But what I wanted to do here is kind of show you a little bit about the power of CSS and what it can and can't do. And again, it's wide open, the options or the things that you can do with CSS. So with all that said, let's see, do I have anything else to talk about? Composer Style Preferences. So under Preferences, you also have the ability to set any of your defaults. And then when you create new elements, or you have existing elements that don't already have styles, they'll get applied with these preferences. Matter of fact, let me see if I can open up another version of Composer and show you how that works. So if I go into Preferences and I want to change all of my group labels, make them a little bit bigger, 20. We want the text to be white and the background to be blue. And maybe the element labels will make, I don't know, it's going to be ugly, but we'll make it this way and make those bold, for example. If I say OK, now every time you'll see that I add a new group, they're going to have the blue background. If I add an element, it's going to have the text box of orange. So now, again, these preferences are stored within your browser. If you have another developer or another browser, you could go back to your preferences and you could export styles. And what it'll do is it'll just create a file. And then if I reset this, let's say restore defaults, it's going to change it back to the defaults. And now I can go in and re-import. Oops. Go to preferences, import my styles, and go to downloads, and you have your styles back. So that's a way that you can actually transform or copy the styles from one developer environment to another. And again, this is something that you might want to do if you have a style sheet like this that has your company branding, colors, and stuff like that. And these style preferences are enough to satisfy the need for your branding. Then you can just copy this or download it and import it so that everybody has the same set of styles when they start developing these forms. Okay, so that kind of covers those. And last but not least, we'll just look at it at runtime. Again, I just launched the form. You can see that the styles have changed here. The Google reference to Tangerine. So here's my drop downs. If I want to change all the group labels, and I'm going to change the text font, and I'm going to change it to Tangerine, which is this Google font, you'll see that I got this nice little style. So let's make these a little bit bigger actually so that we can see them. Oops, it needs to be bigger than that. So what this is showing, two things. One is that you can access these external CSS definitions, and then two is you can use the rules to apply CSS anytime you want. So you could have conditions based on, or you could have these styles changing based on condition. We already covered the first three with the 3D. So let's look, and we just did the apply styles. So now, I mean, these are each one of these is a different selector, right? So if I want all the drop downs, I think I did this before, and you want the background color to be blue, you can do that. So now all of your drop downs. So these are the built-in definitions, right? The built-in class selectors. If I want to do the same thing, let's make the text color white so you can see what's going on. We can do that too. So the idea here is that you can change these things globally, so if you have all of your text boxes or all of your drop downs or all your date pickers, you can have them dynamically change based on these built-in class definitions. The other thing you're seeing here too, as I mentioned before, is everything's dynamic, right? So as soon as you apply that style, it's gonna happen. So you don't have to refresh the screen or anything like that. And then last we talked about this graphics and doing this yin yang. So this is my div tag that I put using the HTML element, and then when I click on this, it's actually going to generate this yin yang symbol. And this is 100% CSS. There's no image. There's nothing other than the CSS definitions that you saw in the custom styles editor. That's about it for me. I went fairly quickly, but again, the idea here was hopefully to give you an idea of what's available to you within Composer in terms of styling your forms and the different types of configurations. And then and not really what CSS is all about, that you can kind of find on your own, and it's just too much to even understand actually, or to put into one of these web tips. But hopefully this will give you enough to work with in terms of getting your forms looking the way you want them to look, and maybe a little bit more professional, or maybe closer to your company branding. I think that's back to you, Tara.
Thank you, Gary. That was great. Does anyone have any questions, or do you want to see anything again? I don't think there are any questions, so I think we can go ahead and go to the next slide, Gary.
All right.
So we do have a few events coming up. We're doing a training at Moen in North Olmsted. It's Monday, August 7th through Friday, August 11th. It's for Studio and Composer version 11. There's more details on our website if you would like to sign up. And then coming up in September is the WUG Annual Conference in Atlanta, Georgia, on Monday and Tuesday, the 18th and 19th. And in the end of October, there's going to be an Ohio WUG, and then there will also be a Lean Utopia after party at the Gervasi Winery in Canton. You can go to the next one.
All right. I think I can. There we go.
Okay, this one is about solution care. I know a lot of your companies already have it. If you do not have it, though, it's really a great support system. You can contact us at any time for any of your needs. And if you want to get started with 5 free hours, you just need to email solutioncare@clearprocesssolutions.com. This is just a little overview about Clear Process Solutions. We were the WINSHUTTLE Partner of the Year in 2015 and 2016. And
Whoop.
That's about it. But
sorry about that.
That's okay. This will be up on our YouTube channel and on our website this afternoon. So if you wanted to look at it again, or if you wanted me to send you the deck, that's always a possibility as well. Just let me know. And I hope everyone has a good day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.